but a technology that is already in use. And then there exists a still more terrible weapon, a weapon that the Americans and the French have already mastered. Its development was a priority for the Chinese army.
The Chinese have followed very closely the American dependence on the electromagnetic spectrum, the use of communications and networking among satellites and ships and command systems to fight a war. They saw what happened in the first Gulf War. They saw what happened in Kosovo. They watched Afghanistan. They watched the second Gulf War. And they realized that we are more and more dependent on the electromagnetic spectrum and moving communications back and forth. And an electromagnetic pulse, which is produced by detonating a nuclear weapon, usually fries transistors and stops that kind of communication.
An electromagnetic impulse weapon uses a nuclear explosion to generate an electromagnetic wave. When this wave hits boats or planes, it instantaneously destroys all electronic equipment. No one dies, provided they are far enough away from the nuclear explosion. But the American battleships, totally dependent on electronics, would immediately be disabled.
The Pentagon report described a nuclear detonated or nuclear-generated EMP. I asked people in Pentagon, why don't you say they have conventionally generated EMP? They say, we don't want them to know whether we know them. The conventionally generated EMP is less problematic, and it is more useful or more usable, because when you have this EMP, there will be no nuclear fallouts. There will be less international protests. They already have it.
Yes, it is like shooting down the satellite, getting the submarine under the aircraft carrier, EP-3 Antonov. It is, look, we mean business. You pay attention to what we're doing. We're publishing the figures that our military budget is going up because we are creating a strong defense against you.
China's developing power isn't only military. The regime has understood that it has to make use of every citizen, every business, every organization in its confrontation with the United States. An arms race wouldn't make sense against Washington. It's a war to control energy, the media, culture, and raw materials. And facing an America that overconsumes, that is deeply in debt, an America weakened by its own excesses, China counters with its best weapon, its breathtaking economic growth.
The new threat isn't the classic military threat, direct confrontation between one country and another. Today it's no longer guns against guns, airplane against airplane, or tank against tank. Confrontation takes many forms, in many different areas. For example, in finance or the media, there can be attacks in all these areas. The object of these new kinds of conflicts is the same as in a conventional military confrontation, forcing the enemy to accept certain conditions. It's still war, but war today goes beyond this military domain. It's what we call an unrestricted war.
One has to learn to decode the battles in this new war. Sometimes they are small events that seem harmless at first. Thus, on February 27, 2007, the main American stock indexes plunged. Paris had just lost 3%. New York is in an uproar. The cause of this mini crash began with a tornado that originated on the other side of the world, in Shanghai. Suddenly, and with no apparent reason, the stock market there lost 9%, and it took the whole planet down with it. Nobody really understands what happened, but in New York, they pondered the lesson. China had just shown that it could use its new economic power to destabilize its adversaries, above all when they are weakened, like the United States, by the subprime crisis.
Beijing uses economy in several ways. First, by influence. Well, in Southeast Asia, worldwide. They invest money when the leaders visit that capital. Then they sign some agreements. The second is what you said. they would only hint at something they might do. For instance, the now $1.2 trillion foreign reserve of China as of the end of March 2007, 40% of them are deposited in United States Treasury bills. So if Beijing decides to transfer that to euros, it will be very painful to the United States. But Beijing doesn't need to say. It only hints here and there. And Washington feels a big headache.
Thus, China and America multiply their battlefields. There is the piracy of Hollywood DVDs, the recall of Chinese toys by American builders, the reception of the Dalai Lama in Washington, the buying up of oil companies by Beijing, hundreds of conflicts. China and America think that they have to dominate in order to survive.
The U.S. consumed over 35% of the whole, global consumption, right? 8 times as their population percentage. So they enjoy this position as the only superpower. Then they can get extra resources. So there is a bipartisan support stance for U.S. foreign policy. They will remain as the only world leader in the world. And then they will keep alert against any country, no matter the name of this country, China, French, Russian, Germany, India, Brazil, any country that can threaten the U.S. dominance, that will be a problem.
In Washington, China has become the major preoccupation of every administration. China is a competitor in the realms of economics, media, and technology. World hegemony is no longer measured by the number of nuclear warheads. Congress has even created a permanent investigation commission, unique in its kind, whose mission is to study the economic and security challenges posed by China. Russia never got that kind of attention during the times of the Cold War.
There is a global plan from China. They have two. One was started in March 1986, called the 863 program, and one in March 1997 called the 973 program. The first, the 863 program, called the Torch Plan, was a global plan designed to gather and bring to China dual-use technologies that could be used to improve China's technological base and economy and industry while improving its military capacity. And it's an organized thing, you know. Each industry every year from the central government gets goals and targets and objectives and gets told to send people out and go do that. So it is organized, and it's not perfect, but it's organized. And the 973 plan is a parallel designed to improve their capacity in basic research and innovation.
People in the States pay too much attention to China. So there are some oversensitive on China. Then this oversensitive leads to a lot of, over-exaggerate conclusion. So that's no good to find the real fact. I think the real fact is that the economic power of China is still far ahead of, far lack of United States, not to mention military power.
If the French Foreign Intelligence Collection Service goes to a student and says, while you're at Tufts University, we want you to go over to some laboratory and gather this, the student can say, I'm busy. It's going to interfere with my dissertation. If the Chinese intelligence service goes to a student and says, we want you to, you want a visa? You want a passport? When you go to the United States or to France, you will write a dissertation on this, you will work on this project, and you will report back to us, or you'll never get a job in China, or your family will lose its house. Now, they have the capacity to do that.
The United States cannot maintain itself as a superpower if we allow our industrial production to be offshored, to be outsourced. And that's what's happening now. We're finding very large amounts of our basic core industries. And I don't mean just like steel. Steel is one of them, copper, basic, resources. But things like semiconductors. And when we find that our semiconductor industry has gone from 12, state-of-the-art wafer fabs to 3, because more and more are being built in Taiwan and Japan and, well, not in Japan, in South Korea. And in China, if we're allowing our, state-of-the-art, cutting-edge electronic science and technology research and development move to China, we can't survive as a superpower.